Hello everyone! Before we get today's episode going, I have some fun news to share with you guys. We have, are you ready for this? Brand new merch! If you haven't had an opportunity to check out the merch shop at pmap.creator-spring.com, you would see that there is a wide range of amazing stuff done by some outstanding artists, such as the retro design done by Roya Shahidi, the wonderful human designs done by Elgis Grandpa and My Emerald Tears, and of course, the wonderful Mr. Moneybags design done by the wonderful Tipsy J Hearts. Well, now you can have a whole new meaning to streetwear with this wonderful new spray painted Mr. Moneybags design done by Drags. Inspired by the shirt that he draws for his persona, I saw that shirt and I instantly thought I need to have a Moneybags version of it. So I made sure to commission Drags to make this a reality, and he knocked it out of the park. Available in t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, even pennants, which is a new one for me. That's interesting. You can find many different ways to rep this incredible design today. We even have a fun little snapback version of it that you should be repping on top of your head today. Seriously, Drags knocked it out of the park with this design, and I think that it would be a wonderful addition to your clothing collection today. So please go to pmap.creator-spring.com so you can order your new merch today. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Postmodern Art Podcast, the podcast dedicated to giving artists who are wowing the world over the platform they deserve. I'm your host, Nathan Ragland, and for this week's episode, well, I'd like to deal you guys a new hand of a classic episode, if I may. Today I brought on part of the creative team behind Wildcard, the adult animated murder mystery series in development. I decided to bring back the series creator Alex Bahrawy and also bring on the lead comic artist Kat for a fun discussion about how things have developed since our previous episode all the way back in episode 11. Yeah, it's been that long. This was a fun, insightful conversation, getting to really get updated when it comes to the comics and where the pilot is going forward, especially considering the fact that they've recently started a new Indiegogo campaign to make sure that the hardworking staff and crew working on this pilot to get it made gets properly compensated. And that's why I wanted to make sure to bring them on to help spread that word, because you guys need to absolutely support them today. If you want to support that Indiegogo campaign or just the Wildcard series as a whole, make sure you check out the links in the description below. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. Leave 5 stars wherever you can. I see that stuff and I absolutely love it. If you want to go a little bit further with that support, maybe you should consider joining the Patreon at patreon.com/pmap. There you can get early access to episodes, behind the scenes content, bonus episodes, and so much more for as little as $1 a month. And hey, look, if all you're trying to do is find a cool place where you can meet some incredible artists, really grow as a community, get to discuss your artwork or other guests that have been on the podcast or whatnot, maybe you should consider joining our Discord server, the Artist Sanctuary. We've already developed a fun little group of people there that I absolutely enjoy seeing their presence every single day, and I sincerely hope you would be willing and wanting to join that community today. But now, without further ado, please enjoy the Postmodern Art Podcast.
Hello?
Hello. There you go. You were muted for a second there.
Sorry.
Hey, you're fine.
Hello.
Hello. It has
How's
been
everyone doing?
Doing good. About yourself?
Doing good. I'm excited to do this again.
I know, right? It seems like yesterday was your first time.
I know. This time I promise I won't answer all of your questions within the first 10 minutes.
No, it just makes the podcast easier. You kidding me? No. Well, to be fair, at least when it comes to this time around, I wanted to get Kat to answer the same questions that you had already answered previously. So it won't be the first 10 minutes before like the first 30 minutes that you'll answer all the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to let Kat do a lot of the talking since I've already had my chance to be in the spotlight.
Well, I get Kat will probably have a lot of the talking, at least when it comes to like the comic aspect or whatnot. But when it comes to the actual like the pilot progress or whatnot, I'm gonna need you to bulk up for that one.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And how are you doing, Kat?
Well, thank you.
That's
I'm
good.
really excited. I watched the episode that he was on before.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I'll say honestly, that's a little bit more research than I probably should have done. I should have made sure I haven't asked any previous. Well, I figured because I remember first off, I remember the vibe from the last one. It was a fun episode. I still remember that one very fondly. So, but I just wow, words just escaped me for like 2 seconds there. What happened? No, it's one of those like I figured a lot of the questions I asked last time was more or less like stuff about like the initial progress of it and the fact that this is more or less kind of a part introduction of Kat to the artist world and part progress to where we had left off. I figured I don't have to overlap on too many questions. I think maybe who knows.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I do appreciate both of you guys being here. So.
Yeah, happy to do it. And I'm sure even if we have some overlap, my answers have probably changed since then.
Oh,
so
fair enough.
We'll try to keep it fresh.
Fair enough. I also want to go ahead and just drop this little nugget. I wanted to make sure that this time around I actually helped out and contributed, so I dropped a cool little hundo for the Indiegogo, so there you guys go.
Oh, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that.
Hey, yeah, I'm more than willing to help you guys out. I mean, obviously you've seen how long I've been trying to support you guys, so... All right, Alex, Kat, before we really get this podcast going, I must ask the icebreaker question of the podcast, if I may. Let's say you get to go to a desert island on your own accord. It's just you alone with your thoughts. You get to kick back, relax, breathe. Get to truly enjoy yourself for a little bit. With accommodations. You're not stranded on this island. It's more like a vacation, more or less. But to help with whatever kind of mentality you want to go with, you could bring one piece of media or one piece of art with you to help with whatever vibe you want to achieve in your little private time, more or less. If given this opportunity, what would that one piece be?
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
I think for me, I would bring. God, I'm trying to think. Like, do I bring a book or do I bring my like scripts to write? I think I would bring, if this counts as a piece of media, my own scripts, like my wildcard scripts, because I don't think I could go that long without writing, because it's just something I really enjoy. And that's sort of the aspect of art that resonates most deeply with me. So I don't think I could go for that long. Or I could just bring a journal and a pen. Just keep it simple.
I mean, even then, like with either or, like first off, I'm very loose when I say one piece of media or whatnot. But even then, like think of like the wildcard scripts or whatnot, like just get a chance to work more on them or whatnot. I imagine, especially with kind of that piece away from everything and not looking at the burning pile that is society or whatnot. Get just really work on it. Probably will help creatively more than anything else.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I find I don't have often a lot of time during the day because I work out 9 to 5, and then when I'm not working, I am doing wildcard stuff, but it's usually like approving animations or like working with Kat on the comic. It's never really like actually sitting down to write the script. So, in the last couple of weeks or so, I've had a little bit more free time, and it's been really fun to just like actually get back into writing and kind of formulate that. So I would imagine if I'm on a desert island, I would have all the time in the world, so I could make some really great stuff, hopefully.
Well, there you go. And Kat, how about yourself? What's that one piece you're bringing with you?
I would say it depends on the island. Like if it's someplace I actually want to go out and explore and experience, then probably a sketchbook, just so I could portably take it with me.
Okay.
So that if I got the urge to draw, I could, but otherwise I can bring it. If it's not a really nice island, if it's full of bugs or the weather's really hot, then I would say probably Skyrim.
Okay. I mean, either or is a good option. I mean, either or gives you plenty of opportunity to enjoy some sort of adventure in one way or another. So,
yeah.
Fair enough. But nevertheless, the wildcard scripts or sketchbook / Skyrim. Those are your answers. You're locking that in.
Yeah, locking that in.
All right. Then if that's the case, I cannot think of a better way to start the Postmodern Art Podcast. Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Nathan Ragland. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. You can support the podcast on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/PMAP. And follow us on Twitter and Instagram at PostModArtPod for future updates and guest announcements, including today's guests. They are part of the creative team behind the fun adult animated murder mystery series in development. Welcome to the podcast, lead comic artist Kat, and welcome back to the podcast, creator Alex Bahrawy, the team of Wildcard.
Woo! Thanks for having us.
There you go. Well, thank you. Well, Alex, thank you for being back here. I know when you were last on, it was a certainly fun experience to really get to divulge into kind of how Wildcard first came to be and kind of how much you've been able to grow and develop. And I just knew whenever you guys were starting to get the word out there more and try to get more done with the pilot or whatnot, I knew I'd have you guys back on the podcast. But obviously, Kat, this is your first time appearing on this podcast. And I certainly want to make sure that you get a bit of a spotlight. So I'm going to ask you some of the questions I asked Alex last time and have you get an opportunity to really get to let the people know you more or less. So I have to ask, as someone that is invested in art, especially helping out with, Wildcard a lot these days, I want to go back more or less to know more or less the origin story of Kat, if I may. What got you interested in art in the first place?
I've basically been drawing for like as long as I can remember. Like I used to goof off and doodle in class all the time.
Okay.
And I was really lucky that I had teachers who encouraged that because they're like, oh, this is a hobby that she really likes. So we'll, like, as long as she does her work, we'll let her do that. And like some of my earliest drawings, I honestly remember, like, do you remember the live action X-Men movie that came out?
Yes.
I made a complete knockoff of Lady Deathstrike, and I was like, this is my original character, Deathclaw. and I just like, and then when I got into like middle school, my friends got me really into Warrior Cats, so I started making like Warrior Cats comics in those little composition notebooks you could buy, because we always bought like 20 of them, but we never used them for school. So I started doing comics, and then we'd pass them around the middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I got into high school, it just had kind of become my thing where I was like, I did that in the notebook. I passed it around a bigger audience. And one of the girls in the class, a couple classes ahead of me, she eventually read it. And she's like, hey, people share these online, right? They're called webcomics. And I was like, no way. So that's kind of like what got me into doing comics online. And then like when I was in high school too, I have a slight like sight thing. I don't need glasses to read, but if I read, it can give me a migraine. If I read for very long at all. And I wanted to keep up with the books people were reading, but I could never like read at the same pace as them because I refused to wear my reading glasses and it hurt to read. So eventually like my mom went out and she found graphic novel versions of the books everybody was reading.
Okay.
And she brought those home, and I was like, this is so much more easily digestible. And then as I got a little bit older, I found out we found out my brother has dyslexia. Okay. So we did the same thing for him because the Percy Jackson books were really popular when he was first starting to read, and he really wanted to read them. It just took him a really long time, and he couldn't keep up with everybody else. So my mom got him the graphic novel version of the Percy Jackson books. Okay. And he loves it, like, because it's just like so much can be done in visuals that it makes it a little more accessible to people. And that's, I think, what got me like really that much more keen on comics specifically, was that I feel like it makes a lot of storytelling more accessible to a lot more people.
I mean, it certainly does, especially hearing more or less like the fact that, even the simple stuff and the simple gestures of like, introducing you to web comics, getting these like graphic novel versions of regular novels or whatnot, like hearing how much that had more or less an influence on you, especially seeing how much it more or less improved the experience of enjoying stories like that. Like it's almost it's heartwarming straight up more than anything else, like especially seeing what you've been able to do with it, especially take that in the future. So I have to know, when did for you go from this like general love of art and comics to a passion and then wanting to make it your career?
That it kind of boiled down to when I was going to college.
Okay.
And I got a scholarship specifically through my dad, since he was in the military. He didn't use his scholarship, so I got it. Okay. So I got the opportunity to pursue art more. And I always knew I wanted to do it as a hobby either way, but it was really like an opportunity. I don't want to kind of devalue the fact that I was afforded something really, really nice.
Right.
And it kind of gave me this chance to pursue it as an occupation more. And that's something that I really, having the chance, I didn't feel like I wanted to lose it or turn it down. Um, I do know people who like make entire webcomics as a hobby. Like they'll
Mm-hmm.
have a totally separate job and they'll do it just as a hobby. And then you find out it's not their full-time job and you're like, wow, how? This is incredible. But yeah, for me, it just definitely, I had the chance to do it. So I really wanted to follow that chance.
I mean, that's incredible to hear more than anything else. Can you think of some of what's the word I was looking for? Like some of the personal comics that you've done that you would say that like, you're proudest of that you've been able to develop, especially since you really went all in with developing comics?
I ran a webcomic when I was in college for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and that ended up, because of a lot of circumstances, falling through a little bit. And when it first ended, like initially, I was really disappointed in myself. I was like, how could I abandon a project? Like, it's a let down. I've let everybody down. And then I realized most people's first, second, third, fourth, fifth projects, a lot of people actually like abandon older projects and tackle newer ones, and you really only hear about them after a project takes off. So you're like, oh, that must be their first project.
Right.
But I did have experience running a webcomic and I learned a lot of things from it. And in the future, I'm going to take another stab at it with the things that I've learned.
Ooh.
I am really glad I learned those things though, because I can bring them over to like help out with the comic for Wildcard specifically, because I learned through a lot of trial and error and stuff. Like I learned that how important what's it called? I'm searching for the word. Transparency is
There you go.
when it comes to that. Yeah, because like if you have to stop, if you have to like take a break, or if something comes up, or if you lose, I lost a huge backlog because I kept it all on one art file and I lost that one file. So that was a really bad practice on my part. But I lost the backlog, so I didn't want to tell anybody because I was embarrassed. I was like, oh my goodness, they'll think I'm so unprofessional. So I tried to just quietly leave it and didn't update for a while. And I learned it would have been a lot better to just tell people like, hey, something happened. I lost my backlog. I'll be back at this date. A lot of people are like really nice and understanding if you just tell them up front what's going on.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot about that side of things, like just working with people, engaging with people, and keeping it something that is enjoyable for both sides. Because these are the people that are supporting your work at the end of the day. So I think it's really important to like make sure that you include them at least somewhat, like you acknowledge them.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just wanted to say, going back just a little bit, I love whenever you said that, most people, their first, second, third, or whatnot does not take off or whatnot. I relate to that so hard, especially when it comes to when I was in college and doing filmmaking and stuff like that. Looking back at some of the films that I made, they are not good. They have a nice charm to them, some of them, but they're not good. And so like, I totally get that. And I can at least relate to that. And I mean, I imagine, as you've probably gone along this comic journey or whatnot, like you just hearing you talk, I can tell that you've certainly learned a lot and you've certainly grown as an artist. Like just thinking right off the bat, like with all the little bit that we have talked about, like, are you amazed more or less how far you've been able to develop so far as a comic artist?
Yeah, like sometimes I feel like this is something a lot of people, even non-artists, can relate to. You look at yourself and you're like, I've been doing stuff for so long, I'm so far behind. I hear about all these other people doing all these other things and look at me. Like you really stop and think about it. I'm 26 and I'm like, wow, I'm 26 and I've done all this already. I mean, when you think about the fact you've only been out of school for a couple years, or you've only been out of another job for a couple years, I think when you consider that, it's really easy to put things in perspective and
Right.
look back at what you've accomplished. And I think that applies like more than just to artists, that applies kind of to everybody, even outside the creative fields. Just like you've actually accomplished a lot. Just you need to look at it in a realistic time frame.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I imagine, especially like you were saying, like the fact that you're 26 and thinking back, especially within like the past couple of years, how much you've been able to develop and grow. Like it's really easy to look at stuff in hindsight, especially, if you keep at a craft for a certain amount of time. So there we go. And I imagine one of the ways you've been able to really grow as a comic artist is by helping out and developing more or less the Wildcard Comics, Wildcard Reshuffled or Shuffled. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex. I do not want to butcher that. Shuffled. Okay. Reshuffled is what I'm going to name the episode of this podcast. But
nice.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, but Wildcard Shuffle. Now, Alex, when you were last here on the podcast, I don't even think there was even an inkling of, talking about a comic series like that. So I'll ask you for this next question. How did a Wildcard comic come to be in the first place? Like, when did you have the idea to make that a reality?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So kind of going all the way back kind of to how Kat and I first started to work together, it was like way back when I first started posting content. I think it was either 2019 or 2020. And Kat had DM'd me on Instagram just being like, oh, like, I really like your character models or something like that. Would you be interested in working together? I'm a comic artist. And sort of that was the first instance where I was like, oh, I've never really considered doing a comic before. That's probably what I should have started with before jumping right into an animation, because it's a lot cheaper. But from there, we just sort of, I sent her a script. I was like, oh, do you want to try tackling this little short story that I wrote in the Wildcard universe? And that's sort of what became episode 1 of the comic series. And I think as we were developing the pilot, I was thinking in the back of my head, like, oh, wow, this is not going to come out for a really long time. Like, as I started to bring the team together, we were having planning meetings. I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be like another 2 or 3 years at minimum. So I went back to Kat and I was like, so like, what do you think about maybe doing like a comic series in the meantime where we can produce really high quality, engaging content much quicker to fill that gap when people are waiting for the pilot? And she was on board. She had some really great ideas for sort of like how we could stretch that timeline, and even has been really helpful with additions to my scripts and ideas for like little character interactions and stuff like that. So we had plotted out this whole sort of plan for releasing comics all the way up until the release of the pilot. And then when, spoiler alert, if people listening to this don't know this already, but our pilot is currently on hiatus as we're doing another fundraiser.
Right.
We kind of discussed, well, our initial timeline is a lot longer than we thought it was going to be. We need to sort of reshuffle, to use that phrase again, our thoughts. And now where we're at now, we've released 4 episodes. The 4th is coming out as of this recording tomorrow. And we have plans for 3 more. So it's been a really great process for us, really working together. And I love having the opportunity to work a little bit more closely with Kat and develop out both, the team for the pilot, and then also that we have a full team for the comics now. That's, we brought on an animator, sound designer, editor, all that kind of stuff. So it's been great.
I mean, I can only imagine, especially seeing the episodes I've seen so far when it comes to the, like just seeing the comics that have been out there and whatnot, just seeing how much of a fun time, more or less, that they are, and like seeing the ideas that more or less sprouted because of that. Where do the ideas for these episodes come from? Were these like rejected script ideas for the original pilot or whatnot, or are these like stuff that like you just more or less like you guys more or less toyed around with, thinking about like the universe of Wildcard?
Yeah, so the intention with the comic series is always to have these sort of self-contained one-off stories for each quote-unquote episode. So it would be like way back, it's speaking, touching back to what we just spoke about really embarrassing old artwork. The episode that most recently came out was the 2-parter Case on the Bus with Jack and Nolan. Was a script I wrote in like 2016, and I remember sending like the original script to Kat. We were both kind of just like, oh wow, this needs a lot of work. So we kind of like retooled it, and I was like, okay, maybe I should rewrite this, and now that it's like 2021 versus like me when I was like working on a really bad day job back in 2016, and I wrote this like at a dark period of my life. But it's been really fun to think about like, what are the stories that would be really interesting and fun to tell that I can't necessarily tell in a pilot or like a full animated episode, but would still be interesting to people. So those are things like short episodes I wrote, just ideas that I came up with of like, I always thought like, oh, I would love to have a case that takes place at a jewelry store. So that's, the episode that's coming out tomorrow is episode 4 that takes place at a jewelry store. So it's really just little ideas that I've had that I can now expand upon in a sort of shorter, more condensed way, but still tell these really compelling stories. And the other piece of it was focusing on characters who don't get the spotlight very often, thinking about how we telling their stories, because we have so many characters. I think there's like 8 main characters, and we can't focus on all of them in a 15-minute pilot. So thinking about how we telling their stories through the comics and how are we like establishing connections with characters there. So it's been fun. It's been really fun to think about how these episodes are self-contained, they're one-off stories, but also what is the thread connecting with them, because what we're seeing now, as we're finishing up the first season of the comic series, is these episodes are their own stories, but there's still connections between them, and how are we like establishing those connections? And it's been really interesting to just work through that with Kat, and sort of compare like what's in my script to what Kat's vision is when it comes to the artwork, and really thinking about what the audience is saying. I read a lot of Twitter polls kind of asking people what characters they'd like to see, what stories they'd like to explore. And sometimes I do build out episodes based on that, sort of based on the need of what my fans are saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, Kat, as someone that reached out to Alex, originally to have this idea kind of go out there, were you more or less surprised with how much you've been able to get hands-on with this universe, like the stories you've been able to help tell? Like, what's your experience been like since you've been a part of the Wildcard team, more or less?
Definitely surprised and also really delighted, because when I initially reached out to Alex, I saw that it was another independent project, and this was at the same time that I was still working a little bit on my webcomic. So I had messaged him, and I had reached out because I was like, I really want to see more indie projects get made. Like, I want to see individual people be able to make their own media come to life on their own, kind of like with how influential crowdfunding is now. It's really a good opportunity for individuals to pitch it to an audience directly instead of having to go through 50 other middlemen.
Right.
And I really wanted to see more of that in general, like not just my projects, but other people's projects as well. So I DM'd him and I was like, hey, if you need any help on the art side of things, I'm an artist, I'd be interested in working with you, and et cetera, et cetera. And he reached back. So I always tell people, especially in context to that story, shoot your shot. The worst thing somebody can tell you is no thank you.
Yes.
What have you got to lose, Billy?
Yeah, that is something that
I worked with Alex a little bit. Oh, you're fine.
I was gonna say, like, that was that mentality that you had right there, just shoot your shot and see what happens. That's the basis of this podcast, more or less. That's how I got Alex and you guys on here in the first place. I shot my shot and be like, hey, do you guys want to appear on a podcast? Look where we are now.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I worked with him a little bit. I did I did those first preview comics, and I also helped design some merchandise for him, like some stickers and things that he could give as like Kickstarter prizes and stuff. And when I was working with him, he was just always like very nice. And when you're doing freelance art, the most difficult thing about the job, I think, is the fact that when you're working on one project, you have to also be reaching out to like 50 other potential clients, trying to get everything lined up.
Right.
So it's a very stressful process, and Alex kept recommissioning me and talking to me more, and it was really nice. Initially, at first, the best thing was I don't have to look for another client if one client keeps reaching out to me. So it took away that stress. But on top of that, he's just I lucked out and got a really good client. He's always like, oh, thanks for helping me, Kat. And I'm like, man, I got the good side of the deal in this. I do remember there was slightly personal story. We had a family emergency happen in the middle of when I was working on the bus comic. And I told Alex, like, hey, I might be a week late at most on the deadline I gave you because something came up and it's really serious, and I'm really sorry about that. And he messaged back almost immediately. He was like, oh my God, Kat, no deadline at all. There is no deadline. Don't worry about it. You get to it when you can get to it. Like, I was just really floored by that. And of course, like I tried to get it done. I didn't try to take advantage of that
Right.
because I'm not gonna throw that back in his face. But it's really nice because he treats all of us that work with him like individual people, and he really is like very easy to work with, very nice and very understanding. So whenever he tells me like, oh, I have other things I can have you do, if you want to do it, I know you have your own stuff you want to get back to. I'm like, nah, man, I'm ready for that. Like, I'll do another project. So it's been a really good experience. I have still learned a lot, but he's a very easy client to talk to, and work with. Like I can send him progress stuff, and I ask his opinion a lot because communication is really important, and making sure as an artist you're delivering exactly what your client wants to see, because
Right.
they have an image in their head and your job is to bring that out. So I'll send him progress shots and he gets back really quick all the time. He's like, this looks great, this needs to change, but this looks great. I mean, it's a really good working relationship, and it's helped me like learn a little bit of extra um information on like what I need to check in with more and what I need to communicate with more. I think, as he mentioned, we have a bigger team now. We have somebody who animates the panels, we have somebody who edits everything. And I've learned lessons about working with a team now, in that now I show them the process really early on so that they can tell me, oh, hey, can you keep like those characters separate from that background so it makes my job easier? And I'm like, yeah, that's totally.
Yeah.
So I've learned a lot about communication and the chain of communication when it comes to that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think the benefit of doing indie, like kind of like what we were talking before about how there's been this real emergence of indie animation and indie projects sort of taking the forefront now. That is another aspect people don't often think about, is the communication piece and the team building piece of, when if you're a studio that's like working on like a Netflix project or something, you don't get that level of personal communication between teams usually. So having the opportunity for me as the series creator to have this really open line of communication with people who are working on my projects, it makes that so much better, and it really strengthens sort of the bonds that we have doing this together. Because my philosophy is always that, yes, I'm steering the ship, but I have this entire crew behind me and people who are supporting me. Like Kat is my first mate on the comics, like making sure that everything is like smooth sailing. And we're all sort of in that together. And I think knowing that and sort of knowing that we're all working towards a shared goal makes our products that much better, because there's so much more work and time and just effort into it, especially with Kat. I know she just gushed about me, so I'm going to return the favor and gush about her and say just her level of detail and commitment with working on the comics and everything we do. Like she said, she designed merchandise for the Kickstarter, and I firmly believe she had a huge part. She might deny this, but a huge part in why the original fundraiser was successful was because Kat contributed so much. She did fundraising streams, she designed the merch, she was huge with promotion, like on social media for it. But getting back to my point, she's so detail oriented, and she's so willing, even with the story that she just told, to put the project ahead of everything else. And I never for one time in our working relationship doubted her level of commitment to it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think knowing that and having that security in a working relationship with someone is so valuable, because I can say, you know, I have this like if we're doing another episode of the comic, I can just say, okay, Kat has got this. Like I have trust in her that she knows what she's doing. She's gonna put as much effort into this as she would with her own projects, and I know that, and I can like take a breath and just relax for a minute. And I think that's something you don't see with non-indie projects, is that it's just kind of like there's like bureaucracy and all these processes and red tape that you have to adhere by, versus when you have these really intimate relationships when you're working on a smaller team and a smaller project. I almost feel like the end result tends to be better because more attention and care is put into it.
I mean, it's a good mentality to have, especially, working on, I imagine, like, I think we talked this last time, Alex, but especially for something like this, which is more or less like your baby, like the thing that you want to see,
Right.
like, really grow, and like seeing that there's a lot of love and care going into it, not just from yourself, but from everyone on that team. Like, I imagine it more or less takes a little bit of the weight off of your shoulder when it comes to how you want to tell this story.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I can, for the first time, just like breathe and like know that my team, both on the pilot and on the comics, like we've been working together for years at this point. So I finally have that security of, okay, this is good. Like I can stop micromanaging everything. I can stop being perfectionist. I can just trust that my team knows these characters and knows the story and wants this to become a reality as much as I do. And knowing that everyone is working together and is as passionate about what we're doing, makes me want to keep trying even harder and think about what comes next, and how we can continue to expand upon this. And it's a really great feeling.
Absolutely, absolutely. Plus, I was gonna say, Kat, isn't it nice to know there's someone that is more than willing to support you through and throughout, knowing that they love what you're able to do and what you're able to produce.
Absolutely. There's one small caveat, and it's that sometimes I send him things and I have to be like, are there any changes? And he's like, no. And I'm like, what changes do you
Really?
want, Alex? And he's like, no, 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 it's not a big deal. And I'm like, what changes do you want from me? It's like he's so supportive that if there's like a small thing, he doesn't want to worry about it. So I have to like pry it out of his hands. I'm like, Alex, tell me.
I'm sorry to say this, but I'm the same way when it comes to people that are doing the thumbnails for this podcast or whatnot. Whenever I commission them or whatnot, it's like 90% of the time, it's like if there's something I notice is like very small or whatnot, like if there's a change I need to do, I will say it. But 90% of the time, I'm just like, I don't want it. It looks too great. I'm so glad you even put in the time in the first place.
I know, I get the same way.
Yeah, it's never, and like it's not. I feel like when you commission somebody, you're like, oh, I don't want to insult them by making them think it's not worthy. I want them, like, no, like little things are they're little things, because our job as artists is to take that vision you have in your head and produce it the way you have it in your head. Like I always tell people when they're like, I've done streams before, people have sent me questions that are like, if I open commissions, what's the most important thing I should know? Or do you have any tips for if I do this? And I'm always like, the most important thing is you want to communicate with your client and you want to treat it. It's literally their baby. It's like their project. Like they built it from the ground up.
Right.
So if nothing else, you just really want to make sure that you communicate and you show it that love and respect that you would want if it was your project. So it's never an insult, like to tweak a small thing. And 9 times out of 10, you guys are the most of the change requests I've had are things like, oh, I wanted the color changed on his turtleneck, or oh, I imagine him wearing a jacket instead of a vest. So it's small things that aren't an issue of skill on my part. It's like a little itty bitty tweak. So it's not like it's never a problem, because it's like, oh, that wasn't me making a mistake. That was just I didn't know he had a sweater instead of a vest.
Right. Fair enough. Now, going back to the comics that we've always been producing or whatnot, like I said before, like the stories you've been able to tell with these little one-offs, more or less, have just been fun to see more than anything else. Like the dynamics that you guys have, not just with the main characters, but with the characters you introduce for every single episode. You've introduced so many characters when it comes to these little one-offs, and I love just about every single one of them. Is there like a process you guys have when it comes to developing these side characters? Is there like a stereotype that for like, we need this kind of character or this kind of character? Like, what is it like more or less for you guys crafting the stories and crafting the characters for these one-offs?
Yeah, I can speak to sort of the narrative purpose, and then I'll hand it over to Kat to kind of discuss her process for like character designs, because she's handled pretty much all of the character designs for the comic. So narratively speaking, like when I write a script, because it's, all of my episodes are deeply rooted in sort of this murder mystery genre, I always immediately have to identify, like, before I even start writing, like, who the murderer is, like, who's the culprit in this case, like, who's the person who like steals this, or who's the person who like strangles this person, like, how does this connect to the story? So that's usually where I start with knowing sort of who that person is, and I sort of build the mystery around them. So like, for example, like with the bus case, I always knew, spoilers if you haven't seen it already, I always knew it was going to be the bus driver. That's always an idea I had in the back of my head. And so I sort of built the story around that and said, okay, so like if the bus driver is the culprit, what other characters do we need to sort of like drive this story along? Like, we don't want to have just him be the only suspect. We need like a whole cast of suspects. So I thought, okay, what if we have like a little girl who like you would think there's no way it's a little girl, but then you find out, oh, she's actually like a con woman, and she very well could have stolen this wallet. And then I thought, okay, who else would be on a bus like in the city? How about like a businessman? How about a teacher who's on her way to like get materials for a school project? How about this punk kid who's on his way to a concert or something like that? So really sort of building out that cast of suspects of who could believably have done this, and not to trick the audience, but to kind of think from the audience's perspective of like, okay, who do they think it would be?
Mm-hmm.
And when I was writing the script, I was very intentional about being like, okay, I know it's the bus driver, but the person watching and reading this doesn't know it's the bus driver. How do I make it like very, very, very subtle?
Right.
So when Kat and I were sort of working on the artwork piece of it, we thought about like, what are some background clues that we can like throw in here? And we threw a little poster in the background that kind of like alluded to the fact that it might be the bus driver. But in terms of like the other sort of pieces, really thinking through like, how are these characters like playing a part, like making sure that like every character is not just in there just fill space, but like how are they narratively like driving the story along, and how are they sort of almost like tweaking people's perceptions? Because at no point throughout the episode, when sort of Jack is like solving the mystery, is the bus driver even presented as a suspect. It's just like you have to be able to pick up on that. So when he like gathers all the suspects together at the end, the bus driver isn't necessarily one of them. It's all these other characters that we've met and sort of established throughout the episode. But then if you're really closely paying attention, you could think, that's weird. He said anyone on the bus could do it, but the bus driver's not a suspect. Why is that? And so that sort of leads you to think, oh, maybe it is the bus driver and he's trying to pull a fast one on me. So it's always fun to think about that and to think about like the various connections between things.
Right.
Like I said, with the bus case, like it was very easy for me to think about who would realistically be on a bus. And now with this jewelry store case, which is coming up tomorrow, thinking like, okay, if we're in a jewelry store, there's likely a security person, there's someone who's working the front desk, there's someone who owns the shop, and then there's someone who is an appraiser. So really thinking that through and thinking what makes the most sense in terms of what characters we actually need. But then in terms of the designs, I will let Kat speak to that because I know she has her own process when it comes to sort of what the characters look like versus just being written down on paper.
Yeah. So typically Alex will send me a written description of the characters once it's all situated. And then I have the script to read. So I can read through the whole script and gauge their personalities as well. And if there's any super important detail, like if halfway through the script they mention somebody's an old man, if I drew him as a young person, it doesn't make sense anymore. So definitely like read the whole script, figure out what details need to be incorporated, and then Alex will usually attach a little description of everybody, their age, and basic kind of concept of what he's looking for. Like, oh, this guy is an older guy and he's got some graying hair and he's kind of stocky, like descriptions like that. Mm-hmm. And then I'll sketch up a couple things. So a couple different versions of this character he's described. Again, like Felix, for example, he's described as a short, stocky Russian man who's balding and has a very noticeable mustache. But short and stocky could look in 15, 20 different ways. So I draw a couple basic shape concepts and like sketches of the characters, and I send it to Alex, and I'm like, okay, here's a couple different versions. Which one is speaking to you? And sometimes I hit the nail right on the head and it's a single full character. And then other times it's, oh, I like this character here, but I like this other one's hair. So could you take their hair and put it on? And then I'll draw it all together, make sure it's good to go. And I'll go over like palettes and colors afterwards just to make sure everything's kind of nailed in and polished and everything. And again, it's very back and forth. Like if I'm really struggling with a character, I'll send more progress shots just to make sure I'm on the right path. And like I said before, Alex gets back pretty quick. He's like, oh, this is good, or oh, that I'm not vibing with that one yet. But afterwards, since it also is kind of helpful because if I've concepted them and drawn them a couple times over to get the concept out, then by the time I draw the comic, it's a little more intuitive. So I almost have like a little fast pass of getting practice in to draw this character. And like he said, he definitely wants to like include things in the environment too. Like nothing is more frustrating than watching a mystery and having something so out of left field that the audience could have never predicted it. I mean,
Right.
a lot of mysteries that I've watched haven't done it, but there's definitely been a few where they're like, oh, but he's got a secret ring, and you've never seen the secret ring, and you're like, how was I supposed to know that? I definitely want it to be one of those things like Sixth Sense where the ending hits you and you're like, no way, no way. And then you go back and you watch again and you're like, yes way, oh my God.
How did I miss that?
like he said, there's a poster in the background that has information about the bus job, so you can kind of gather like these bus drivers aren't paid a whole lot. And then yeah, there's a point where like Patrick looks and he like reaches back like he's trying to help Nolan up, and in the comments, one person caught it, and it made me so happy that one person caught it, because a couple pages later, hey, the bus driver reached after him, didn't he? And nobody responded to that comment. Like, everyone else ignored it, and Alex and I were like, yes, yes! Oh, it's not out of left field.
Goodness. I mean, it's glad to know that there's a lot of more or less like time and consideration put into these stories and whatnot. I mean, like I said before, like it's a lot of fun seeing how this stuff will play out, knowing the amount of like critiques and details that are going into this kind of stuff. And thinking back to obviously the comics that have been presented out there so far, do you guys have a personal favorite issue or a personal favorite moment from one of these issues so far?
I do. So, Kat knows this. When she first sent me the ending of the bus comic, I like choked up, and I'm not a super emotional person, but so to give some context for those who might not have seen the episode, it's really focused around sort of Nolan, and really want it to be his story. So it's
Right.
like he gets on a bus, he loses a wallet. The mystery is who stole the wallet. It's the bus driver, but the ending is like this entire time you kind of feel like Nolan's like just down on his luck. Like he's basically a punching bag. Jack is being a complete asshole to him. Like he lost his wallet, like all these other things, just bad things happening to him. But at the end, we have this moment where, you know, the mystery is resolved. Jack figures out it's the bus driver, but they have this really touching moment where Jack is like, okay, Nolan, call the police. Like he stole your wallet. Let's get him out of here. And Nolan's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like he's a dad. I'm a dad. I have a connection with this man. And they just like, they hug. They have like a really nice moment where they just like hug, and it's just, I love that because it's like I wanted him to have that happy ending like so badly, because he was been through so much shit during that episode, and I was like, I want this to end on a really positive note for him. So having him made that connection with like another father, and like knowing that sort of the theme of this episode was sometimes people do bad things out of desperation. You know, not every law is justified. We don't have to take extreme action if someone apologizes and feels bad for what they did and sort of explains themselves.
Right.
Versus Jack is sort of the opposite end of that spectrum, where he's like very black and white. Like, no, you broke the law, you go to jail. Nolan is very understanding, and Jack is just kind of like, he stole your wallet. Like, you should be pissed. And Nolan's like, well, I'm not. Like, I'm happy that I had this experience, and I'm going to hug this man because we have a lot in common, and I understand sort of why he did what he did, and I'm not pressing charges against him. So I watch that moment a lot. Like I go back and I rewatch it over and over again because it's just very sweet. I thought it was really well done, sort of the way that Kat sort of positioned everything, and even just down to the way that the music was composed to that scene chokes me up every time. So I think that's definitely my favorite.
It's definitely a very sweet moment more than anything else. A great way to definitely end that story more than anything else. Kat, do you have a personal favorite moment or issue as well?
I have a favorite to draw and a favorite to read, and
Okay.
my favorite to draw is probably in the jewelry one where Clark starts freaking out under pressure, and I like drawing that one because I messaged Alex and I was like, can I get a little silly? And so his expressions are like a little more, I think the way I phrased it was, I was like, how on model do silly faces have to be? And he was like, Not exactly. And so I sent him a preview and he's like, yeah, I like that. So I liked getting to exaggerate a little more. But to read is definitely almost the same exact scene as Alex for a totally different reason. I like the scene where Nolan's like, no. And Alex is like, I like it because it's touching. And I'm like, I like it because somebody finally told Jack no, and it's Nolan. Like, Nolan finally stood up for himself. Because I feel like from everything I've seen of Jack and from how much Alex has told me, I also feel like he almost gets this gambler's high from solving mysteries, where like to him it's almost a game. He has to find the bad guy and put the bad guy in jail, and then he's won.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a pride thing for him. He's like, I'm the smartest, I'm the best, and I prove it by catching bad guys and putting them in jail. And when they're in jail, I win. It's another game that I've won. It's almost like a card game to him. And Nolan is the opposite, where to him it's not a game, to him it's real life, and these are people and they're individuals with their own feelings and their own backgrounds. And Nolan just wants to try his best for other people because he's very empathetic and he sees them as individual people. And when I was drawing that scene, Jack again is very like cocky, and he's like, I like, even in the way he talks to Patrick, where he's like, no, you don't get to back out now. You don't get to back out of the game now that I'm winning, type of attitude toward him. And Nolan cuts it short and almost brings it back to reality, where he's like, no, these are people. They have feelings. It's not just nameless bad guy who goes to jail. It's Patrick, the bus driver, who has a son to worry about. And I have a daughter at home, so I know what that's like.
Right.
So I really liked, just even when I read that part in the script, I think, did I DM you when I was reading the script and I was like, yes, go Nolan.
Yeah. You did.
And I
Yeah.
love seeing Jack because, again, like, I love seeing him and I love seeing these adventures around him, and he's a great main character. I just feel like Nolan is such a great, almost exact opposite to him, and the contrast makes for a really good journey for the both of them.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what's so special about these comics is that like we even before the pilot we're getting to see sort of what the entire rest of the series might look like how that relationship between those two characters is going to play out. And even like at the end, like at the end of that episode, it's really the first time you see even a slight sense of humility from Jack, where it ends on this really like sort of sad, bitter note. But you also like that's the first time you kind of feel a little bit bad for him. You're like, oh, there's something else going on here. But it really sort of sets the stage up for it's sort of like this uneasy mentorship that like Nolan has over Jack, and sort of Jack reluctantly being like, okay, this guy might actually be able to teach me like how to interact with people and like not see things so black and white. So I think that's another huge benefit of the comic for me personally, is that now I don't have to wait until I have an entire animated series to show the things that I want to show and tell the story that I want to tell, because I can do that through the comics too. And I think having these really significant moments sort of sprinkled in to an episode that may initially just feel like, oh, it's a fun one-off story, but we also have these sort of like really poignant moments between characters, I think has been really fun. It reminds me a lot of sort of like those random episodes of Futurama where it gets really heavy, like with the one with the dog, where you're just like, oh, this is gonna be another fun, wacky episode of Futurama, and then like you're crying by the end of it. So same type of vibe I'm hoping to go for.
I mean, I think with the episodes you've presented so far, especially obviously the bus one, which I mean, there's a reason why it was a two-parter more or less. Like you've done a good job both translating like a good fun vibe that the show's going to be, but also like how serious and how sentimental like the values of what this series is going to be about in the long run. Like I think you both have done a great job really illustrating that, both with the writing that has been provided as well as the illustration and the art that's presented more or less. And I have to know, like, obviously, we're about to have episode 4 like drop when it comes to the animation aspect. What more should we expect, at least when it comes to the wild card comics?
So Kat and I actually just had a meeting about this.
Okay.
So, and this is something I did a little voice recording for the end of the episode that's going to drop tomorrow, touching upon this. But we have 7 total episodes planned. So with 4 coming out tomorrow, that's 3 more. ideally by the end of this year. With our current schedule, I mean, I try to be really generous with my timelines for people because a lot of these people are working other commissions. But
Right.
yeah, we have a full season planned up until episode 7, ending with this big conclusion where, sort of touching upon what I was talking about before, this thread that connects all of these episodes really comes together in that final episode. And then the next 2 are, I won't spoil too much about them, but they're really character focused, focusing on characters we haven't seen much throughout the series yet and telling their stories. But yeah, Kat and I really want to see this through, at least through the first season. And then after that, kind of who knows what comes next. It will depend on where the pilot is. But at least through the end of this year, we've got a couple more episodes coming that I hope people will look forward to.
I mean, I know I've certainly been looking forward to what's been presented out there, and the good wow, words just escaped me. Come back to me. No, it's incredible, more or less, like what you guys once again been able to present, and knowing that there's a good bit more that's going to be connecting to all these previous ones, and like the possibilities that could be out there, especially with the characters you have been presenting, more or less. Like, it just makes me excited to know what could be next, whether it's what's planned or who knows what's to come, more or less. So, if nothing else, like from considering the fact that from, geez, sorry, I got this. No, considering like when we were last talking, Alex, like whenever you were last on, seeing what you've been able to develop from that or whatnot, having these comics like presented out there, more or less, it's been good to know. It's been good to like explore this universe more, because that's the one thing I was craving whenever we were talking last time. Like, I wanted to know more about that world, and having these little like tastes here and there, like it's been great to really like dive headfirst into this place. So thank you both for presenting a fun little opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been really great for me personally, to have this opportunity, because with the animation piece, I know everyone has been waiting so patiently for the pilot. Um, just the level of time and sort of effort it takes to producing even just one episode of a fully animated series is so much versus, and that's not to downplay the massive amount of effort that goes into the comic, but we're able to produce content so much more quickly. Like, I can write a script, I can run that script by Kat. We do a round of edits, and then she almost immediately starts sketching out ideas and the artwork. So it's a much quicker process, and that to me is so beneficial. And she and I have talked about, even when the pilot comes out, continuing on with a comic series, because I realistically, unless I win the lottery or some company scoops my project right up and gives me full creative control of everything, I can't realistically do much beyond just a pilot right now.
Right.
So being able to partner with people like Kat to tell the story while we're sort of producing the pilot on the side has been such a great opportunity. And even thinking about like the future of the series, and like, is the future of the series these animated comic episodes? Like, do we tell the entire like wildcard story through comics because the animation side just takes too long, or we're just not there yet? So that's something we've talked about as well. And to me, when I was initially planning the comics, and like, I didn't think like, oh, we should do animated episodes. That's just sort of an idea that came up, and I was a little on the fence about it at first. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, I really want to only do this sort of animation styled after the pilot, and I wasn't sure that it was going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I saw it, I was like, oh my god, like, this is really good. Like, I finally got that feeling of like, I made an episode. Like, I'm telling the story that I want to tell, and like, my characters are talking and interacting with each other, like they're solving mysteries. So from that day on, I was like, yeah, like, I would absolutely tell the full series story in comic form with the same type of animation. I think that would be amazing. But I don't think I can expect that level of commitment from Kat right now and say, hey, can you sign on for like 5 seasons?
I mean, Kat, you'd be down for that, right?
Plus the comic is well, I told him, I was like, oh, I love it. I told him, I was like, well, I know I for sure can finish out season 1. Let me see if I can make my own stuff at the same time as this on a realistic schedule, and then I'll let you know if I'm gonna stay on for more. So it's entirely possible. Like I have to gauge, I have to work on two at the same time and see what I can manage, and gauge that. But that's why we're like, oh, we'll check in a little bit later and see what that's like. But I think that the comics too are also really good, like proof of concept, because with the pilot and the synopsis, with the pilot still in work, like you said earlier, you were craving to know more about the world, and I think a lot of people were interested by the designs and the concept, but they didn't have like a whole lot to grip onto. And now that they see these characters interact with each other, they kind of know more of what they're getting into, and it definitely helps people invest their attention into it. It gives them something they can kind of like hook onto and look at. And I think that's also another thing about the comics is that, like, if Alex does win the lottery, or if a studio does reach out and says to him like, oh, we want to back you, I don't know which is more realistic out of those two with some of the ways some execs are. With either of those coming up, if he can get it animated, I know very well and good that he does want to get it animated. And again, the comics are there to supplement. Like, the pilot ended up being more of an undertaking than expected, and it's taking longer than the initial idea was. Like, from the Kickstarter, the initial prediction, it's definitely going to take longer than that. So before it was like maybe one or two comics, and now it's like, okay, maybe a season of comics. And like he said, if a studio picks it up, then it's a season of comics. But if a studio doesn't, he's told me he's really dedicated to getting this story told and getting it out to an audience one way or another. And come hell or high water, he's going to see it done. It's just what avenue it gets to go down. But I've kind of understood, like, I'm like, I have a heads up months in advance, but I do still have like a little bit of curiosity sometimes if it is going to be something that I watch through a streaming service, or is it going to be something I'm working on for 5 seasons type deal.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, that's understandable. I mean, obviously, Alex, I remember from last time how badly you want to tell this story, more or less. So if the comics are that avenue, I mean, hey, for me personally, I'll take it. I will gladly consume all that content. It's like it reminds me of that one meme of like, like 2 cakes are like on the table, and one person that made one of them is like, oh man, that cake looks so much better. Meanwhile, a person comes by, oh boy, 2 cakes. Like, it's one of those, like, as cool as it would be to see this animated, the comics have been doing a wonderful job, like I said before, like exploring these worlds and providing that fun interaction or whatnot. So if I just get like a bigger comic cake, I will consume every single bite, and I will gladly be happy with that more than anything else. Long story short, Kat, Alex, you guys are doing a great job with these comics. I appreciate you guys providing that for us in the first place.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I don't want to speak for Kat, but I've almost, I don't want to say I've enjoyed working on the comics more, but I feel like I have a more consistent sort of appreciation for the comics, because the pilot process is so long and drawn out, and there's I don't want to say there's no end in sight, but it's going to be a while. It has been a while, but with the comics, like, we're consistently seeing progress. Like, I can consistently get artwork back from Kat, and it just makes me really excited. And we're really going all out with them. I don't know if people know, but like, we get a music composer to do original compositions for every episode. I'm getting really in depth with sort of the editing process. Like, I've hired a really experienced editor to make even just the small animations that we see more complex. So we're really putting a lot of heart and soul into it. So it's really nice to know that people have appreciated it. So it's great.
Really nice on my part too, because he'll send me like updates out of nowhere of panels that got animated, and it's so cool, like, seeing somebody else work off of a base that I made. I'm like, whoa. So it is definitely like, it's just really cool, like, seeing how much work is going into it. And then I know, like, you mentioned the editor was like, he sent me progress of how the editor was going out to do something new with this episode, and I was like, oh, let me get in touch with him. I can make his job 10 times easier on him if I give him this one thing for that. So now we're like, oh, well, he's like, oh, well, now that I have this, if I have this for future episodes, I can do this thing for future episodes, and it's going to be way easier. And I'm like, all right, it's settled. We've got more resources going into it.
Absolutely.
Uh, but yeah, and I feel like, and again, it's kind of that, like you said, that meme with the like, oh my god, two cakes. I feel like it's a different venue, you know, like at the end of the day, when it comes to like novels and animation and comics and video games, even all these mediums across the board, what they're doing is telling a story. They're
Mm-hmm.
just telling a story through a different way of presenting it, and getting, I think the story at the core of it is what makes it special. And if you don't have a good story, you could have like the best, most beautiful stuff in the world, and it's not going to make a difference if that core story that compels people isn't there. And I think that's why, like, with video games, for example, sometimes you see these retro games and the story sticks around for decades.
Yeah.
And a new game comes around and it's got gorgeous graphics and gorgeous visuals, but it's forgettable and it's gone in a year. At the end of the day, the core story is what makes it really special. And I think that's why the comics are as successful as they are, is because I'm working on that good story that can capture people's attention and bring them on into it. So that's kind of like, I think why, like he was saying, whatever happens, he'd love to see it animated. That was the visual he had in mind. Like that was his vision when he started. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to see it animated because that's the closest thing to his vision. But his story is good, and either way, he's going to make sure that the story gets out there, whichever avenue he can take.
Well, there you go. There we go. I'm glad. And again, like just knowing at the end of the day, like the story's gonna be told in one aspect or another. I'm already excited for it, and I appreciate what you guys have been able to present out there and what's potentially to come. And we've kind of been dancing around a little bit, but I think it's time that we emphasize. Obviously, as good as the comics are, we are waiting for this pilot. So, Alex, everything's going absolutely swimmingly, and everything's going according to plan, right? Right. Right. No,
Well.
I say, look, as someone that has seen obviously animation be as complicated as it can be or whatnot, I can only imagine what may have sparked up. So for those who are maybe not in the know when it comes to this kind of stuff, how is progress coming along for the wild card pilot?
Yeah, so I mean, straight up, in terms of sort of where we're at progressively, we are in good shape in terms of what we've gotten done so far.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who don't know, we've been working with a small independent studio called Astrobun, who were on the previous episode where we discussed the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
But we had been working really closely with them after our first fundraiser on Kickstarter ended back in 2020. Sort of immediately started working on an animated intro sequence. From there, we were sort of getting the logistics down of sort of the pre-production work. So as of, I want to say it was over the summer in 2022, we completely finished pre-production work on the pilot. So for those who might not know what that means, it's basically all the sort of pre-work. So like getting all the models together, doing test animations, doing lip sync testing sort of things. And that accounts for a huge chunk of work on the pilot. So what we've done so far has been really significant. And
Right.
for those folks who have been following us on social media, have sort of seen what's come out of that work. Where we're at now, and this is something I'm sure a lot of people listening to this can relate to, is that we're in a recession.
Yeah.
Inflation is at an all-time high right now. That has really severely impacted sort of our projections for the pilot and the budget piece. So what we had raised on Kickstarter was a really great start and helped us sort of fund where we're at now. But with the way that the world has shifted in the past couple of years financially, we're in a position now where we need more funding in order to finish the pilot. So we are currently on a break to run this fundraiser, which ends in February on Indiegogo.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of that is to sort of supplement what we need to finish the pilot. But that said, and this is something I've discussed with Kat, no matter what happens, no matter if we raise $2, which is not true because we've raised a couple thousand at this point,
Yep.
but even if we don't hit that fundraising goal, and even if we have to sort of think about other avenues, maybe going to a different studio or doing it completely freelance or just extending the timeline even a little bit further, it's going to happen. I'm
Right.
100% committed to making sure that this comes out, and we've done so much work on it already that at this point there's no going back. It's already like pretty much halfway done. So we got to see it through the end, and I want to, and I'm still really excited. Sort of my excitement for getting this out there hasn't diminished at all. It's more just sort of navigating so we're at the middle stage right now, navigating sort of that next half of work on the pilot and the approach we've taken. There's a lot of unknowns, but the one thing that's not unknown is sort of the commitment everyone on the team has to making this come to life.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to think a little bit more creatively about sort of how we're going to do that, and hope that people continue to just be patient and be passionate about sort of the work that we're doing, because it is really amazing. I can't share too much without spoiling, but what we've been working on has been really incredible, and I'm really proud of all the work that our team has put in on it.
I mean,
that's like oh, sorry.
No, so you go ahead.
I was just gonna add, in relation to the original Kickstarter, I know we said this in the past, but that was on a video that came out toward the beginning of everything, and the audience has like more than doubled. So I just want to say, for anybody new on board, the Kickstarter funds went only to the animation, and to that process. So the comics that came out, all of that Alex did separately, like out of pocket. So I just wanted to say that, so that if anybody's jumping on now, they're not confused. They're like, oh, well, why'd you take the Kickstarter money and put it into comics then and spread it out thinner? Like, that's not how it went. So that is something I've actually said in the past, and I try to be really transparent about, is this additional content, like anything extra besides the pilot, Alex always waits till he can pay out of pocket and fund it himself. And so that side of things is like, and like when I talk to him again, I'm like, I work with him a lot, like, what's a realistic timeline, and does this timeline work for you, and blah blah blah, because like I said, he has to raise the money himself from his own day job, so his day job money also gets poured right back into the comic. I feel kind of bad. I'm like,
no, I want to do this, trust me.
Yeah. But I did want to specify that, because I know that's a big issue in crowdfunding, is that sometimes people take that money and they put it into things that they probably shouldn't have. And that's sometimes no fault of the creator even. Like, I know a lot of times what I've heard from people who've crowdfunded in the past is, oh, I raised $1,000 and I thought I could do it for $1,000, but it turns out the shipping on all my prizes was $500. So now I'm only working with $500. So that kind of stuff comes up a lot too. And that's why I've tried to specify, like, and when I said earlier, I work on the comics and they're kind of two separate entities. They're separate in that sense, in that all of the Kickstarter money, all of the Indiegogo money, all of that goes directly into getting the pilot made. And I don't see like a cent of that stuff, and I don't take away from the resources going into that. Like, I never bother the animators with can you get me this, or can you get me that? Like, I go to Alex, or I make it myself, because they only have a finite amount of time and resources that they can work with out of their portion, and I don't want to detract from what at the end of the day is the main thing that everybody's looking to see made.
I mean, like, especially, thinking about everything that's already gone into this project or whatnot, and everything that, I can only imagine there's probably at least one person out there is like, well, how come you guys already got the funding beforehand? Like, I don't think some people really comprehend that animation takes a lot of time, effort, money, a lot of people, a lot of manpower or whatnot. And I am not surprised that you guys have had to go to a new crowdfunding campaign to get this thing done, because more than anything else, like you even said this before, Alex, life happened. Inflation went up. Money is harder these days. Like,
right.
There's a lot that goes into this thing, but especially for the story that you want to tell, and for the story you've been telling with like the comics or whatnot, hearing that obviously that stuff is coming out of your pocket. From our last conversation that we had, Alex, I'm not surprised by that. I know how much this means to you. I know how special this whole entire story is for you. So the fact that you would go to the lengths to make sure that this stuff is done properly, done to where everyone is paid for their time properly more than anything else, and making sure that people are compensated the way they should be, it does not surprise me that you've had to go with this route again, but I am fully on board and hoping that you guys are able to get the fundings that you guys need to tell this story, because it needs to be told.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Sorry.
You can go
I
ahead.
was also gonna say, like, we a lot, like you said, a lot of people don't realize how much goes into it, and I really think that's where transparency also comes in, because like I said, when I had to drop my comic, I was really embarrassed, and I would try to keep it a secret that I fell behind, when really, if I had just been upfront, it would have been, most people are understanding, it would have been 10 times better. But we've definitely seen this already. Like, everybody who likes animation knows the name Don Bluth and all
Yep.
of his movies. um, a lot of people don't know he and one of his co-directors on the first, on Secret of Nim, they both pulled out second mortgages on their house to fund it. And they were so far in debt that when the movie came out, they actually only broke even on repaying their debts. So he didn't even really make a profit off of that movie, because he just had to pay back into everything he had pulled out.
Right. Right. I mean, like I said before, like just thinking how much that you're investing into this, especially Alex, you like knowing how near and dear this story is and how much you want to get this story told, hearing everything that you've basically done to make this a reality. Again, it does not surprise me, and I'm glad that I I appreciate the fact that you're taking the opportunity to go with the crowdfunding again. The fact that especially with how wonderful people were the first time around, and how much love and support is behind this project. Knowing the fan base is there, like I can only imagine. Like I can. I don't want to word this. I'm at a loss for words tonight, and I don't know why. I was gonna say I can only imagine like how important it is for you not only to tell this story but make sure it's done right in the proper way with people being compensated accordingly.
Yeah, and it's definitely a double-edged sword, sort of having such high quality work that's come out so far, like with the studio that we've been working with and others, because it's a good thing because that's the standard that I want to have my show be at. I want it to look like on the level of something you would see on like Netflix or even just like another indie YouTube series. But the bad side of that is that people see that and they automatically assume, oh, they must have a ton of money behind this. Like,
Mm,
there's no way this can look so good without a ton of money. And it's like, yes, there's a ton of money, but it's all coming out of my own pocket. Like,
right.
I saved for years before I even started putting out content for Wildcard. Like, I had to save from like 2016 until like 2019, like 3 full years just to do what I've done so far. Um, so it's really encouraging that so many people are so invested in it and want to come see it come to life. I really hope that level of sort of passion and drive continues to carry on both through the comic series and just until the pilot is released, because I don't want people to think we're abandoning anything or giving up just because we hit sort of like a hiccup in the
Mm-hmm.
process. And like Kat said, I also value transparency, so I always try to be as open with sort of what's going on in the process as I can, especially for people who have donated a lot of time and money and attention to the series. They should know sort of what's going on with it. But I'm excited. I think this year is going to be a really big year for us, both in terms of what we have planned for comics and the pilot, and just sort of thinking about, well, what comes next? Like beyond
Yeah.
this, like what else is going to happen? Like what other things can we do with this series in the meantime? And sort of thinking about, well, do I even want my show to be on Netflix because they cancel animated series after one season now? Like thinking about like keeping this strictly indie so that I can have full control over it, and thinking about like, okay, yeah, I could have a really successful independent series on YouTube for years. Thinking about that. So there's a lot to consider, and it just makes me happy to know that people are interested and people are so engaged and want to see more, and that really is what keeps me going and wanting to continue to find new ways to tell these stories.
Well, there you go. There you go. And I was gonna say, like, obviously, people clown a lot when it comes to Netflix or whatnot. I'm just gonna throw this option out there. If you can make it a reality or whatnot, just see if you can get it on like Apple TV Plus. Like, just
Yeah.
promise like a Jason Sudeikis Ted Lasso cameo, and boom, you're sold.
Yeah, always cling to your story rights, because it's a big thing. Is a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people sell the story rights, and they don't realize that companies will do this. There was this entire world. It was novels and comics and illustrations and everything. There was so much pre-production work for it. It was called Dinotopia, and you've never heard of it because Universal bought it so that it couldn't compete with Jurassic Park. It is actually this practice a lot of studios have. They'll buy other people's shows and then they'll lock them away and hide them because they have a similar show.
Okay.
And they don't. So, like, never sell 100% of your story rights. Make sure that if you do go to Netflix, if Netflix drops it, you can make it on your own. Or if you do sell it to Universal and Universal has their own murder mystery series coming out, you can make it on your own. So that's definitely my advice there is make sure that you have enough of the rights to take it and make it your own way if somebody else lets you down on it.
Yeah. I will say, speaking of sort of like competing murder mysteries, have you guys noticed like that's like a thing now? Like,
yeah, I've noticed
it's
like
like everywhere. There's like movies, there's like, I mean, there's thankfully outside of like that Velma show, there's no real animated murder mystery series. So I'm still holding out hope that like mine could be that one to fill that gap. But I was thinking about the other day, I was like, hey, I was the first person who did this. I've been doing this since 2019.
Hey,
Knives Out came out in like 2020.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be like, maybe as murder mysteries become more and more popular again, maybe studios will be like, we need to get in on this, and they'll be like, that guy. That Alex guy.
That Alex guy.
I'm hoping.
I was gonna say, Netflix literally released a movie, and they're about to release a sequel, literally called Murder Mystery, starring Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
Like the
Right.
The writing's right there on the wall more than anything else. Like, probably someone else's blood, knowing that's a murder mystery. But that's aside from the point. No, I mean, like, we were talking about like the whole, like working on the pilot and everything that goes into it. Like, I am also personally like getting into that as well. I'm someone that's helping out my co-showrunner Tipsy J Harts. We're trying to get her story, The Evil Little Thing, like we're trying to make that reality. We're just in like the beginning stages, like, getting the pre-production like just barely started. And even then, like, I can already tell that it's gonna be a task ahead of us when it comes to like getting everything down, getting the funding that we need for it or whatnot. So like hearing what you guys are going through and like knowing like what goes into like an animation or whatnot, I'm not surprised that you guys have had to go with this route, but I sincerely hope you guys are able to get what you need to get this done, knowing how much love and support has gone into this project in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And seeing sort of like these other indie projects take similar journeys, like did you guys see the Lackadaisy trailer that just came out? Like, that's been like years in the making, and the fact that it's like finally real and they finally got to that point like makes me so excited to be like, yeah, like that could be us next. Like, we just got to keep working at it. And they sort of, from what I've seen, has taken a similar type of approach where they keep putting out like comic content or like other short little animations to tie people over. And now they're like finally they released the trailer, and like all their fans like came right back and are like so eager to like see the release of the pilot. So I'm hoping the same thing happens with us, because that's always concern is, if people might drop off because they think it's taking too long, or like they're kind of just like, call me when the pilot is out. Like, that's fine. Just come as long as you come back when it is finally out. So
yeah, ironically, you mentioned the Lackadaisy, the animated one they're making, and remember what I said, like all the way back in high school, somebody told me, they do these comics online, they're called webcomics. Lackadaisy was one of the first webcomics I found and read. And it was like already so far in when I found it. So
I mean, yeah, especially with the world that Lackadaisy is, goodness, that's just a gold mine for future animation just in general, past that pilot more than anything else. So
right.
Yeah. But I'm sincerely hopeful for you guys to be able to get that story told more than anything else. Like, I know, Alex, you said like through hell and high water you're gonna get out there one way or another, but I sincerely hope that like the animation is able to get funded. I hope that the stuff is able to go forward and actually like become a reality, because I know that there's a lot going into this, and it's gonna be incredible when it finally comes out. So I have to ask, like, at least for you, you got the Indiegogo campaign going right now, which for those that would like to contribute, there will be a link in the description below. I got y'all covered. But what do you hope to see? I don't know if it's changed from whenever we last talked, but what do you hope to see when it comes to this show and like the animation aspect? Like, what do you hope to see when it comes to Wildcard?
My ideal, honestly, would be pilot is released and then it sort of takes off in the same way that these other sort of indie animated pilots have taken off. Like there was the name is escaping me right now. It's the Western one.
Long Gone Gulch.
Yes, that one. Like that was so cool. That
Yes.
animation style was so unique, and it like blew up, like sort of thing. And then there's another one very recently. Again, don't know the name, but it was about like a little cat. It's not Lackadaisy, but it looks kind of similar. But again, like took off really, really quickly on YouTube. So I'd love something similar like that to happen, just so we can get the word out there. Because the consistent comment I always get from people on my videos is, wow, this content is so great. I wish more people knew about this. And I was like, yeah, me too. So I think us really establishing ourselves as sort of like not a competitor, but a player in the indie animation world, you know, alongside things like those other projects that I mentioned, where we are something that somebody knows. Like someone says, oh, did you see the Wildcard trailer that just dropped? Or like, there's a new Wildcard episode that's coming out next week. Just people knowing who we are, and getting excited for the content, and just like knowing that I can potentially do more beyond the pilot, and thinking about sort of what that would take, like how I can expand upon the team, how I can commit to producing episodes on a regular basis is really exciting to me. And it's something like years ago I would have thought would never be something that could happen, but it's a real reality now with the amount of things that people are able to do indie style on YouTube or on their own platforms, kind of just funding it with their own team. That was unheard of years and years ago. It was always just, you need to pitch your idea to a studio. The studio will like it. They'll put it on a streaming service or somewhere else, and that's it. But now it's a real reality that you can do this yourself. And yeah, it takes a lot of time and work, but it's really worth it in the end, just from what we've done so far. It's even just been a fun process for me. So I would love to get Wildcard to the stage where it's like a household name and people know what it is. Like we have merchandise and like Hot Topic or like something like that, where people love it or excited about it. So that's what I'm looking forward to, because I've had a taste of that so far with the fan base that we have now, and how much it's grown so quickly within the past couple of years, and how excited our fans are. I can't imagine being on the level of something where it's that big. And that's what I'm really looking forward to, because it's never about the money for me. I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this to have like a fan base of people who are passionate about it and want to watch it and contribute to it and want to hear these stories and relate to the characters and relate to things that are happening in the episodes. That's why I do it. And I would love that. Like even just from like I said, the little I've gotten so far of people making comments, like the one that Kat mentioned, where people are picking up our clues, or even someone's just really understands sort of what I was going for with an episode, and they really just like it resonates with them. Like that is what I'm looking for, and I can't wait until it's even bigger than it is now.
Day when I catch a wild card shirt out in public is going to be the day I know I can like rest happy.
Same.
But like, yeah, you've seen it with other media too. Like I mentioned before, these are all just different avenues for storytelling, and we've seen it happen with video games, and we've seen it happen with comics. And I think animation is on its way to possibly being the next avenue that could do that, because like so many years ago you wouldn't hear about indie games, and now people have like I was at the grocery store the other day, and I saw a kid with a Bendy and the Ink Machine sweatshirt, and I was like, oh my god, it's that thing from the internet. And yeah, and like with comics, you go to Barnes and Nobles now, and there's like a little they have Lore Olympus gift cards for Barnes and Nobles, and you're like,
oh my god,
that's that on like so we've seen where I think video games kind of broke into it first with having a really strong indie scene that became mainstream, and then comics quickly followed, where now you have indie comics outselling the giants even. You have individually produced comics outselling DC and Marvel, and you've even got DC and Marvel making deals with webcomic hosts, because now that's what everybody's looking at.
Right.
So I do think that it's entirely possible to see animation go that way. And I just really like seeing people get their ideas out there and get their ideas seen and share their stories. And Alex, I think, definitely deserves it after everything he's already put into it. So I'm waiting on that. Hopefully not a child in a wild card sweatshirt. That would definitely be weird. Like an adult in a wild card sweatshirt would be preferable.
I would be concerned as well.
It always weirds me out. Like you have kids with like South Park stuff on, and you're like, are you 5?
Yeah.
Why do you have that? Where are your parents?
You and my mom both. She like I sometimes like have to sugarcoat the wildcard things that I show her because she's very much like just so like sweet and innocent, and like if like I know like Jack's about to say fuck, I'm just kind of like, all right, that's enough. We're good here. Because she's one of those people who like she doesn't know a whole lot about animation, so she would see like the character designs and be like, oh, that's so cute, it's like a Disney movie. Not knowing that like someone's about to get shot or something.
So
it happened back in the 80s, and so like in the 70s and 80s, these adult full-length feature animated films were really popular. And one of them was Felidae, and if anybody knows it, there's violence and cussing, and it's super super adult. It's really gory murder mystery thing. But a lot of people only saw the cover and they were like, that looks like All Dogs Go to Heaven. Like people thought it was a Don Bluth movie. Some people, you know, the whole Berenstain Mandela effect thing. Some people legitimately think Felidae was a Don Bluth movie because of the animation style. Parents bought it for their kids and would just pop it into the VCR player and walk away.
Oh God. Oh no. I was gonna say, like you said, like 70s and 80s like adult movies. The first one that came to mind is Fritz the Cat. So I mean that says anything.
I would hope you didn't see the cover and think that's for kids. If you've
no, I've seen the cover. No, I definitely know that was not for kids.
Yeah, no, Felidae and Watership Down and Plague Dogs.
Oh, God.
It's like this holy trinity of animal movies with very wholesome looking VCR covers. And because they looked at the art style, they're like, it's a kids movie. It's about bunny rabbits. Nope. It wasn't. I mean, the creators are even like, it's for adults. So, and that's not even just animation. I know when Beetlejuice came out, a lot of people, when it first came out, thought that's colorful. It has to be a kids movie.
Right.
And he drops the F-bomb twice, so it's definitely not.
See, I'm just going to prove your point right now because I've never seen Beetlejuice and I thought it was a kid's movie. Until you just said that, I was like, what? He says fuck?
Yeah.
Hashtag let Beetlejuice say fuck.
Wait, I was like, no, that's even funnier if you think of like the certain context, especially like the resurgence thanks to like the Broadway show. The fact that they had Alex Brightman, who is the voice of Beetlejuice on Broadway, appear on an episode of Teen Titans Go as Beetlejuice tells you that it kind of reinforces that people think that Beetlejuice is a kid's film.
Yeah, and like the strip club scene where he shrinks down and goes into the model, and he like rounds a corner and there's the strip club, and Barbara like smacks her husband in the arm. He's like, "What? I didn't build that. He made it."
That's right. Oh goodness.
Yeah, it's a lot. So that's your mom's like looking at the cover of Wildcard. She's like, that's a colorful children's movie.
She's got a pink shirt. How bad could it be?
Yeah. I was gonna say, Alex, especially with you. I imagine, you know, having that mentality. You probably didn't show Mom the recent animation they did with Beau Bleu, did you?
She like messaged me about that almost immediately, and she was like, "Oh, so that's different, huh?" She like, I think she kind of has a crush on him because she like. This is embarrassing to say, but that's not the first time we've sexualized him in that way. And like, the last time we did it, she texted me and she said something like, it was like we like did like a little meme artwork. I don't know if you get, this is probably a really obscure meme, but like the meme of like Thanos, where it's like thick Thanos and he's just got like a dump truck. So we basically just did that with Beau, and my mom texted me and she was like, "Oh, that's interesting. It kind of makes you wonder like what's below him." And I was like, "Mom." So your mom and I are in the Beau fan club. I saw him. I was like, I think he was in the original test I sent you. Because the test
Yeah, he was in the one where Nolan went to go talk to Jack.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I remember I was like, I love this man, whoever this man is. I imagine him sounding like Kronk.
Basically. Goodness. Well, we've been talking a good bit when it comes to what you guys have been able to produce and what you guys are hoping to do going forward more than anything else. But for this next question, if I may, I know I gave this to you before, Alex, but you can answer this one again. I want to give you both more or less the dream scenario, if I may. Let's say I am Big Shot Mr. Moneybags. I get to come up to you guys and I'm like, look, we know that there is a lot of potential when it comes to what you guys are producing. More than anything else. Wild card or maybe anything else outside of that. We know the potential's there. We just want to give you that little extra push, more or less. We have access to anyone and everyone in whatever industry possible. And more money than should be possible. We should probably be making sure that more animation is secured when it comes to streaming services and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll focus on that later. Right now we're focusing on you guys and you guys alone. If given this opportunity, what would be the dream Alex or Kat project? And why would it just be 20 seasons of Wild Card?
Legit though. That's a good question. Kat, do you want to go first? I gotta think about it.
Clearly, what we do is we are like, okay, so we need to do the wild card version of Frogger and release that as a AAA title, complete with loot boxes.
You just have them avoiding buses.
Bow skin in Fortnite now.
I'm talking about. I want to see Nolan in Fortnite more than anything else. Just seeing how like nervous he would be trying to attack people.
Like realistically, if someone was like, okay, you can have all these resources, and Alex was like, oh my god, Kat, what do I do? I would definitely say the first thing you want to keep safe. If you can go to a mainstream studio or streaming service, they do have a lot of resources. Like I always champion indie stuff. I like to support indie stuff, but they have resources that are going to streamline things for the creator. So I would just say to Alex, make sure you keep your creative rights more than anything. Secondary is royalties. If you have to capitulate on one or the other, do it on the royalties, keep the creative rights, because like I said, if it gets canceled, if something happens in 2 years, if they decide they want to hide it away in a secret vault, you can still take it and go elsewhere. Second, if you have a lot of bargaining power, definitely keep your royalties. Like you definitely want to be the guy that benefits off of that has those checks coming in 5 years. But yeah, that would be my advice. And honestly, if he had all those resources, personally, I would probably I would love to stay in contact, but I would probably go either continue to work on my own stuff or try to help with another indie thing, just because that's what I really love to see. Like I love to see other people get to see their ideas made, and I would want to keep helping with that. So if he had all the resources in the world, I'd probably say like, it was great working with you. I'm gonna go now help somebody else with their thing or work on my own and just get more ideas out there, like get more media out there. Cause I feel like that's really kind of the whole thing. When people say support artists or artists should support artists, you can't, like, everybody can't be like, okay, so all the artists will come support my idea, right? Like, no, you kind of got to help each other out too. So that's where I would go with that. I would be like, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy. I want to see somebody else's thing follow in your footsteps.
But I was gonna say, but also, Kat, like as Mr. Moneybags, I extended the offer to you as well. So, do you have like a dream project you'd love to see come to fruition?
I get Moneybags too. He's
yeah,
like,
you get Moneybags too.
So much. Whatever you want to do, you can go ahead with.
Yeah, fuck it, I got the money for it. Do it.
Honestly, I would just try to like advertise my own comics. Then like I would set aside an allowance to advertise for my own stuff and just make that, like, if I had the, like, if I got paid enough over crowdfunding or coffee or Patreon or anything, I would just make comics. I would have it update 5 days a week.
Well, fair enough.
I would just make free to read content. There you go.
There you go. There you go. And now, Alex, have you thought about what you would have with this Moneybag scenario?
Yeah, I think, I mean, in addition to obviously just like making the full series a thing, really like, I think leaning into like the franchise aspect of it, like this is gonna sound weird, but like having like not like a theme park, but like maybe like a wild card themed like escape room would be really cool. So it's like
Ooh.
tied in, like having like I would write like an original scenario for like the escape room, so it's almost like you're in an episode of wild card. Like I'd have like props from the show in there and like references to like old episodes and stuff, and like maybe some like character actors like dress up or something as characters or something like that. I think that would be really fun. And then what Kat was saying, sort of joking about before, is actually something that I've always wanted to do, which is make a wildcard game. I know
Okay.
nothing about game development, so I would definitely need Mr. Moneybags to help me with that. But I would love to do some sort of like indie style video game for wildcard. I think that would be really fun.
That would be incredible. Though I just gotta say, the little escape room idea, like, screw the series. That's where the money's at. Let's go with that. I want to see
Right?
that become the reality.
I would honestly pay so much money to go into an escape room and to like take too long to find a clue and have a little screen. Like if you've ever been on the Mummy ride, there are no character actors. It's all screens and you see the characters on the screen. I would have like I'm taking too long to solve it, and the little screen opens up, and it's like a little animated Alex on the screen who's like, "Hello, is anyone in there?" and knocks on the screen itself. Like, I would pay to get berated.
It's like freaking Jack just pops up on the little screen. He's like, "Oh, come on! Like we have places to be, people."
Exactly.
Well, Nolan is like, "It's okay. Go at your own pace, Rocky."
Oh my god, there you go. That'd be incredible to see. That would be incredible to see. But sadly, we gotta get down from the dream scenario. We gotta get back to reality, and I'll ask the ever so generic question: where do you guys hope to see yourselves, say, 5 to 10 years from now?
5 years from now, I would love to continue to be working on this series. I think with what I have planned, I think it's a story that I don't want it to go on for too long. I'd like it to be one of those shows that ends like right when it needs to. And I think if I like got started on this in like the next year or so, that timeline would fit well with that. Outside of Wildcard, I would love to explore other projects. I have a lot of other ideas in mind. I think I'd really like to try my hand at contributing to other indie animation projects. Like, I don't know if that's consulting on scripts or doing directing work on those or something like that, but I'd love to help someone who is where I am now get to where I will be in the future, if that makes sense. I love that idea of being like a mentor to other indie projects. That would be great.
That would be wonderful more than anything else. Kat, what about yourself?
Like definitely long-term goal, if I had to say in 10 years, you know how you're saying like, oh, Tracy Butler's Lackadaisy, and I brought up Rachel Smythe's Lore Olympus because their gift cards are in Barnes and Nobles.
Right.
I would love to be one of those people where some other indie creator is like, yeah, I really want to be a cat. You know, like I really like that. And when people join I haven't done an art stream in a little bit just because I've had so much real life stuff going on.
Right.
But when I used to do them, people would say like, oh, I want to be like you one day. I want to have a web comic. What would you recommend? What is your advice? It genuinely made me happy, not only to have somebody look up to me, but to be able to turn around to someone looking up to me and say, oh yeah, let me help you on that. Here's what I can recommend. Like that sort of thing is such a big deal to me. So definitely if I ever heard another artist on a stream say, oh yeah, I want to be like Kat who worked on this, or I really like Kat who worked on this and it's my favorite comic, I would like die inside of happiness a little bit. Not a little bit, a lot of it. So definitely I want to be that. I like making free to read stuff as well. So I know with Wildcard, the eventual goal is to see it. The highest goal would be to see it on a big platform, on a streaming service, something like that.
Right.
But for my own projects, I just want those to be free to read, easy access, part of a network type. And by network, I mean a lot of the times when you look at webcomics, there's often advertisements for other webcomics, because what they have is a lot of them are on networks now. So like Webtoons is one of the biggest one, where it's a network, and as you read, you see advertisements for other ones or recommended ones. Hiveworks is another network. It's smaller than Webtoon, and you'll recognize the same ads if you read any Hiveworks comics. But I would really love to I feel like the more content there is on those, the more it brings people in, because then your comic links to somebody else's and to somebody else's and to somebody else's. So it really helps get more of those out there, and it helps people's stories be seen. And I feel like that's a really big deal when it comes to storytelling, is you have to have people who are listening for it to be genuine storytelling.
Right. I was gonna say, you were talking about the networking thing or whatnot. And I know exactly what you like. I know what you meant by that. It was one of those the podcast. This podcast actually used to be part of a podcast network, the Apocalypse Podcast Network. Lovely name. Now, for a second, like what I would do is like between the intro and the actual episode itself, I'd put like a little ad for one of the other podcast and network. Wonderful group of podcasts. I sincerely hope they're doing incredible stuff still. But yeah, no, like having that opportunity to where like you are in that kind of same conversation that like you were talking about before with like the lackadaisy and stuff like that. That's something that I sincerely hope you get to at some point. You know, especially seeing the work you have been able to do, especially when it comes to the wildcard stuff. As we start to wind down the interview, I just have one last question I want to ask you guys. Obviously, you both have been deeply entrenched in art for ages at this point, like whether it be, you know, just wildcard even well before that or whatnot. How important is art, not just for you, but for the world as a whole?
I think it's vital from my perspective as someone who primarily creates art through writing and storytelling, because for me, I mean, the whole reason I wanted to do this in the first place was because I grew up experiencing these stories that really resonated with me and made these connections with me. And that was the first time I realized that you could do that through like a TV show or like any other type of series. So that was for me what really sparked wanting to write and wanting to create something just like that. Like my primary goal with this series and any other series I work on is to have it resonate with someone and make it special for them and for it to have some sort of connection with them. And I think that's so important in the world, because a lot of people do go through their lives not having that, or needing some sort of, you know, validation of how they're feeling if they're struggling with a mental health issue or, you know, whatever else is going on in their life. To see that represented through a character, like in a book, on a TV screen, through a video game, through literally any form of media, is so powerful and engaging. And I say that from experience of someone who had a relatively rough childhood growing up, and, you know, would watch my favorite show or play my favorite video game and sort of get lost in that world and make connections with the characters or what they were going through, and seeing how powerful that is. I think that is something that the world needs. And that's why content creators continue to do what they do, is because they know that people need that. And that's a want in the world that everyone has. And everyone likes to see themselves represented in media, or make a connection with something in media and say, yeah, I've been through that experience. I like how it's represented here. This makes me feel better about what I'm going through, sort of thing. So I think it's very vital.
Wonderfully worded, if I do say so. Kat?
Can I be a little bit of an art history nerd?
Go for it. I'm not stopping you.
Okay. My degree is slightly different from other. There's bachelors of arts and bachelors of fine arts, and the only difference is how many art history courses you take, and I have the latter, which means more courses. So I think it's important, and I can back it up, because we've always had this tradition of storytelling and sharing, and art is a really good avenue for storytelling. And like in the Western world, after the bubonic plague hit and everybody was miserable and they're like, oh my God, what do we do? How do we pick up the pieces? The Catholic Church in Italy, it had one shot. It was like, what am I going to dump money into to try to save everything, to try and get production going, get food, like agriculture, get going again, get people up off the street. What am I going to do? They dumped all their money into art. And it increased the morale so much and the perception of everything that everything else kind of just followed. And like the farmers were like, yeah, okay, we can start farming again. And the merchants were like, yeah, we exist now and this is really cool. So everything else just kind of followed suit. And you see that like throughout history where art is used to commentate, or it's used to inspire. I mean, even in bad ways, like you see all these propaganda posters and those are all art and it's made to kind of inspire this ideal in people, and it does inspire. William Hogarth, he's the father of sequential art technically, which is where you get comics.
Okay.
He was an 18th century British artist, which you wouldn't think that's where the father of comics is from, but he was. And he used to make these series of entire paintings. He would release a series of paintings that played out like storyboards. And he was touching on issues in England and France at the time. Like he did one about alcohol addiction was a really big problem in Britain at the time.
Okay.
And he did a series on the detriments of alcohol, and he did a series on the detriments of gambling. And he did another series on like the follies of abandoning your family and stuff. And those did have an impact. Like they kind of changed society because he drew these characters as very comedic and clownish and down on their luck. And people were like, well, I don't want to be like that guy. So I'm gonna cut the drinking and gambling and I'm going home to my wife now. And you just kind of see throughout history, like governments or the Catholic Church in the Renaissance, or even just individual wealthy patrons, when they need to see an increase in morale, they dump money into the arts to see that storytelling, to see that sharing go up, and that will inspire people to react a certain way. And when things in society aren't going great, you have people like William Hogarth who are like, I'm going to make a comic about it, or a series of very large comic panels as paintings about it. And it does have an influence, and it can have a positive influence if it's used for that. And even just entertainment, like it doesn't always have to have a purpose in like an exact purpose in politics or in social events. Like if you're just making something to make people feel good, people need an escape and people want to feel good, and they go to these stories to feel good. Like, so I do think it's really, not only do I think it's important, but I've seen like the historical backing for why it's important and how it's been used. Even like illuminated manuscripts, those old medieval books with all the drawings in them, the whole reason they put drawings in them was because most people at the time, the majority of the population couldn't read. So they put these drawings in to inspire people so that they would see these. And they're like, they're so detailed. They're so intricate. Some of them are gold. They put gold leaf in them to impress you that much more. And it drew people in. So I think that with venues like this, with animated things, with video games, with comic books, with all of it, even just paintings and illustrations, people can relate to it, people can resonate with it, and it can elicit feelings. And that's why it's a really important device for communication and for storytelling, is because you elicit feelings out of it.
Those are both wonderfully worded responses, if I do say so myself, honestly. That's all the questions I have for both of you guys. I've already showered you both with a whole ton of praise, but I'm going to shower you with a little bit more because it's my podcast. I do whatever the fuck I want. Look, Alex, I know I talked a lot about last time when it comes to what you're presenting and how excited I was to see what you guys have been producing forward. And, you know, since our last conversation, seeing the stuff you have been able to produce, especially with the comics that you and Kat have been working hard on together, like, it's incredible. It's been wonderful, more or less. I love this world, and I love these characters, and I enjoy seeing more of it and seeing how dedicated you still are to this, no matter everything that's been going on in life, in animation, and art. Like, point to something and you can tell that it's not exactly great, but the fact that you still have that dedication and love to really tell this story and really push forward with it, I I appreciate and love that to no end and to no avail. Kat, the work you've been doing with these comics or whatnot, like it's incredible. One, the amount of love and support you've been showing Alex, but two, like it's been incredible the stories you've been able to translate thanks to these incredible just like sequences, the fun environment, the incredible characters, and the way that your art like translates this fun world. You've done a fantastic job with it, and I appreciate both what you guys have been able to do and what is to come. Alex, whenever I saw that you guys were doing the Indiegogo again, I knew I had to have you guys back on the podcast because I want to show all the love and support I can with this project. I want to see you guys succeed. I want you guys to be able to, I want you to be able to tell that story that you've been wanting so badly to tell, because I know that it's going to be incredible, and it's something that I honestly think the world needs. The world needs to hear this story more than anything else. The long and the short of it is, thank you both for doing an incredible job keeping up the love and support for this project, and I sincerely hope that you guys get to see it through. I sincerely hope that the story gets to be told, and I sincerely hope that everyone gets to show the love and support that it absolutely deserves.
Thank you. I mean, everything you just said really resonates with me at a really personal level, and it's why I do what I do. So I'm really happy to hear that you like the series so much, and you've made connections with the characters, because that's really what I hope to accomplish. So thank you for having us on. I thought this was an amazing conversation, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity just to talk more about this, give an update on where we're at, and just talk about the future. I think the future is the most exciting part of this right now.
Yeah, I believe so as well. But I mean, and once again, I cannot thank you both enough, more than anything else, for your time to be here to talk about this stuff, because if nothing else, Alex, you said, I think this was a great conversation. I think this is fun to really get to reminisce and give updates and really give a good hope for the future. So that's why I'm going to tell people straight up right now, hey, support Alex, support Kat, support the Indiegogos, make Wildcard happen. All right, you guys still have a good bit of time to make it reality. Let's make it reality. Link to that will be in the description below. And if the people out there want to show you guys more love and support, go ahead and plug yourselves for the people at home.
So you can follow me on Twitter while it is still a thing. It might be going on fire pretty soon, but my
going on fire. It's kind of been on fire. It's just the intensity of it.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going to happen there, but it's one of our bigger platforms, so I'm still plugging away on it. My personal Twitter is just my first and last name, Alex Bahrawy, and then the Wildcard Twitter is at Wildcard Series, and same on Instagram and YouTube at Wildcard Series if you want to follow along with what we're doing.
Okay, any plugs you want to add to that?
Definitely. You can... Oh,
okay. Go ahead.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and it's Princess Kitten Art. All one word, and there's no E's in it. So just, if there was an E there, take the E out. It's the same on Newgrounds, except it actually has the E's in it because it wasn't taken on Newgrounds.
There you go. Do you guys have any final words before we sign off?
Just thank you to everyone who's listening right now, and anyone who has contributed or will contribute to helping us finish our pilot. It makes such a huge difference for us, and even just following along with the series means more than anyone can know. As someone who started this not knowing where it was going to go, and has been amazed by the amount of progress that we've had so far, just knowing that we have fans and people who are following along means so much. So huge thank you to everyone who's taking the time to join us for this journey as we continue on with this project.
And Kat, do you have any final words as well?
If you're an artist, definitely shoot your shot, do your best, ask advice, put yourself out there. The worst somebody can tell you is no thanks. And if you want to support your favorite projects, be it Wildcard or your favorite animated series or webcomic or video game, honestly, word of mouth, best way to do it. People might click links, people might see your retweet, but the best way is when you go see your friends somewhere in person and you say, hey, I've been reading this thing, or hey, I played this thing. Way more likely to look into it that way. So,
well, in that case, I hope my word of mouth for my audience today really helps spread the word out more than anything else.
It definitely, it's a deal. And thank you so much I'm flattered to be on. I'm always happy. Alex always tries to include me in stuff that has anything to do with the comics because he's like, oh, you're the art side of it. But it really does mean a lot to me. I'm very honored to be on the Wildcard Project in general and to be on your podcast.
Well, it was an honor and pleasure to have you both on as well. With that, all I have left to say is for the people at home, hasta luego, mi amigos. Tell me what's wrong, tell me it's parts in motion. Sing me a song, tell me your eyes can all open. Show me it all, pick me up in the car you drove when you used to call. Show me it all. Thank you so much for sticking into the end. As this is your first time listening to the podcast, I greatly do appreciate it. Alex, Kat, if you have made it to this point, thank you both once again for your time. It's always been fun seeing how Wildcard has more or less developed since our previous conversation. Like I said, this was back in episode 11. This was whenever I was tiny more than anything else. And even then, like, the conversation we had before was incredible. If you have not heard about Wildcard beforehand or whatnot, I highly recommend going back to that episode. And get more or less like the backstory, the info or whatnot, because there was a lot of info that was in that previous episode. But, with this episode, I just wanted more or less like a cool update and to really catch up, Having guests like Alex back, it makes me more or less think about like the conversations I've had before on this podcast, I don't know how much of a kick you guys get out of these conversations, but I always get like a sense of pride with every single conversation that I have. And this conversation, as well as our previous conversation with the Wildcard crew, it's no exception to that rule. This is a fun project and it's filled with incredible people. I think it goes without saying that I think Alex has garnered a incredible crew to really get his vision, his passion out there to the world. Even thinking back to like that previous conversation that I had, like a lot has changed. I know, with the Astro Bun Studios or whatnot, like they're continuing to do more. They're doing incredible stuff on their own, and obviously, I still love and support them wherever I can. I love and support all these guests that I have had on the podcast beforehand, wherever I can. That's why I wanted to have Alex and, the Wildcard guys back on the podcast. I want to show them that love and support because I know there's a lot of love and passion that's going to this project. So if you take away nothing else from this episode, I just want to ask you guys to do a major favor for me. Please show that love and support for independent animation. And try to get the word out there for Wildcard. Get the word out there more than it already is. Share the Indiegogo campaign if you can. Contribute to the Indiegogo campaign if you haven't already. Like, any opportunity you guys can to really get the word out there about this would greatly and immensely help them a million times over. And I sincerely hope you guys can find it in you, if you can't contribute, to at least help out with getting that word out there, because they need it more than anything else. They absolutely deserve it, especially with how animation as a whole has been in the past. Let's not think about that. Help out and contribute as best you can, not just with Wildcard, but with indie animation as a whole. Let's help make this grow.